because of the policies we have. He wasn't released, it wouldn't happen. 20 times back on the streets. In what world are these politicians living in when they design laws that make it easier for someone like that to be released over and over instead of designing laws that protect the women that are continually assaulted? These are dangerous policies. They're a predictable outcome. They hamper law enforcement and they let dangerous people walk our streets. It's that simple. It really isn't that complicated. In fact, I've spoken with law enforcement, true story, not only in Charlotte, but in other areas where we've gone on the road, this committee, before they're even done writing, somebody has looked at it. Before that even happens, they're watching the person being released. They're not even done with the report, and they're already out. It's an upside down world. It's a bizarre world. It's a sick world that we live in, and it has to stop. For 4 long years, the past administration, the Biden-Harris administration, encouraged this mentality, encouraged soft on crime policies, encouraged the unraveling of law and order in what was our beautiful, sparkling cities. That changed earlier this year. And I know not everybody's gonna agree with me on this, but it did. Since President Trump was sworn back in office, he has done what he always said he would do. There was no surprise here. Restore common sense, restore law and order, restore accountability. And in August, President Trump deployed the National Guard and federal agents to support local police right here in Washington, D.C. And people tell me, oh, they exaggerate in Washington, nothing happens. Well, I just think of the people that I know. I think of the gentleman from Kansas whose intern was murdered in Washington, D.C. How does his family feel? This young intern comes to D.C. to learn, and he never leaves because he's killed, he's murdered. Or in my office alone, where we've had, just in my office, numerous people that have been attacked on the streets in the nation's capital in Washington, D.C. And the stories go on and on. We have other members that were carjacked. I can go through the list. I'm not going to do it. It's wrong. And you know what? It's not funny when it happens to you. Really serious. In August, President Trump deployed all these folks, and what happens when you enforce the law? Crimes went down, safety went up, over 4,000 arrests, and an 11% drop in crime citywide, 11% drop in just a few months. Words don't do that. Ideology doesn't do that. Press conferences don't do that. Action does that. Real action, tough action, necessary action. And because it worked, because results speak like these, many of them are asking for the same help. In September, National Guard units were deployed to Memphis and Portland. Plans are underway for Chicago as well. And of course, in many of these cities, Democrat officials are fighting it every step of the way, fighting safety, fighting accountability, fighting success. And in some areas where there are deployed people who live in the neighborhoods, who live in the areas, we had some folks, even in D.C., said it was the first time in years that they had walked up and down their streets in safety, in years. They were so happy. We're here today because the American people do deserve better. They deserve leaders who are going to protect them and take care of them. They deserve prosecutors who enforce the law. They deserve cities where criminals fear consequences and families feel safe. To our witnesses, I want to thank you for being here. I know it's your precious time. I thank you for speaking on behalf of communities living through the nightmare of bad policy and failed leadership. I even thank the folks that are going to disagree with me. We look forward to your testimony. Thank you. I now will recognize the ranking member, Ms. Crockett.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for calling this hearing. Since January, Donald Trump has used the full power of the federal government to attack Americans in cities across the country. In Donald Trump's America, you are at increased risk of experiencing militaristic operations in your home, increased risk of being subject to detainment by mass thugs and wannabe vigilantes, increased risk of suffering injuries due to reckless and illegal acts by rogue federal agents, increased risk of being deported to foreign nations, even if you are an American citizen. And you're at an increased risk of being targeted by federal government for criticizing the president and his friends. Congressional Republicans have completely abandoned their Article I powers and have exchanged their responsibility to their constituents with fealty to the president. They have allowed the president to morph federal agencies into instruments of autocracy. And as a result, the president has been able to ignore federal law, disregard court orders, and implement the largest pay-for-play scheme in American history. The White House, well, what's left of it anyway, is literally up for sale. The federal courts have characterized this presidency as, quote, lawless. In fact, when ruling against illegal acts committed by the administration, a Republican-appointed federal judge stated, quote, the court cannot imagine how the public interest might be served by permitting federal officials to flaunt the very laws they have sworn to enforce. In a separate case where the administration was sued for unlawful acts, the judge, also a Republican appointee, stated, quote, dependent upon the grace of the executive branch would be a dereliction of duty by this third and independent branch of government and would be against the public interest. But in another case, the court summed it up perfectly by declaring, quote, as is becoming far too common, we are confronted again with the efforts of the executive branch to set aside the rule of law in pursuit of its own goals. Judiciary Committee Republicans have been completely complicit in this corruption. But since they're so interested in restoring law and order, I have a couple of suggestions on where they can start. Number one, this is the President of the United States standing beside his best friend, Jeffrey Epstein. As we all know, Mr. Epstein is one of the most notorious sexual predators in American history. For 8 weeks, the Republicans on this committee have chosen to protect these two men instead of providing justice to Mr. Epstein's victims. Now the administration is panicking. First, they campaigned on releasing the Epstein files. Then AG Bondi and Associates did a photo op with the files. And she said, and I quote, the Epstein list is on my desk. Then somehow the Epstein list didn't exist. Then the Epstein files became a Democratic hoax. Now the president is supposedly supportive of releasing the files, even though he's currently ignoring a congressional subpoena to do so. Now the president is simply crashing out. And it's because he can't seem to explain his special decades-long relationship with one of the most prominent sexual predators in American history. It's already public that he's in the Epstein files, but his administration is hiding the context of his involvement, if any, with Mr. Epstein's horrific crimes. Now, this is Miss Ghislaine Maxwell. Miss Maxwell, who obviously helped Jeffrey Epstein traffic more than 1,000 women and girls, well, Donald Trump is now giving her special treatment while she's serving out her prison sentence. He won't even rule out giving her a pardon or commuting her sentence. I don't need to explain why pardoning sex traffickers wouldn't be restoring law and order. Now, this is Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem. Not only has Secretary Noem been busy filming propaganda ads, she's also been busy cashing in on millions of taxpayer dollars. In fact, Secretary Noem has funneled millions of dollars to a company called The Strategy Group. The Strategy Group helped Secretary Noem win her campaign to become the governor of South Dakota. Corey Lewandowski, her top policy advisor, has worked with the firm. And the company's CEO is married to Secretary Noem's chief spokesperson, Mrs. Tricia McLaughlin. This is what corruption looks like. They're stealing money from the American people's pockets and depositing it into their bank accounts. Now we move on to yet somebody else. This is the so-called border czar, Tom Homan. Mr. Homan is on tape accepting $50,000 in cash bribes stuffed in a brown paper bag from an undercover FBI agent. Apparently, Mr. Homan accepted these bribes in exchange for awarding federal contracts to his friends. Trump's Department of Justice killed the investigation into Mr. Homan's crimes, and congressional Republicans didn't say a mumbling word. Lastly, this is insurrectionist and Nazi sympathizer Ed Martin. It appears that Mr. Martin is functioning as the attorney, director of the Fake Weaponization Working Group, and special attorney for mortgage fraud. All that means is that Mr. Martin is Trump's lapdog, whom the president sends to initiate lawsuits against the president's perceived political opponents. This is what we call organized crime. They're breaking the law, often by stealing taxpayer dollars, covering up their crimes by ending and obstructing investigations, then prosecuting people who call out their unlawful behavior. And while the Republicans are encouraging this corruption, they're abandoning actual victims of violent crime and ignoring the Republican-led state's 21st century murder crisis. In September's appropriation markup, congressional Republicans proposed reducing the FBI staff by thousands of positions and underfunding the agency by more than $1 billion. They've proposed slashing resources from the ATF. They've proposed cutting grants for juvenile justice programs and hate crimes and eliminating the community violence intervention and prevention grants. They're least. So no matter what they say.
I think I'll take mine now. I'm going to try to stay for as much of the hearing as I can, but I won't be able to do it at the end. So,
Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I wanted to just begin by underscoring that I hope people will keep in mind as you hear my remarks. One is that when you reward criminal behavior, you get a lot more of it. Two, you said it's not funny when it happens to you. And alas, I have a personal story to tell. And three, you said letting criminals off the hook is not compassion and it's not